South African economy has been on the ropes for a while now. Post-COVID-19 recovery has been made hard, by load shedding. The ANC National Executive Committee, met, of course, this weekend, and we also saw that Economic Transformation Committee briefing the media. One of the topics, though, being on the media, or the agenda of the ANC NEC, is the party's economic transformation. And the subcommittee briefing the media again on the ANC deliberations around the economy as well as on load shedding. But based on what came out of the briefing, can we say the ANC is capable of finding solutions to our problems? For more on this, I'm now joined by independent researcher and economist Duma Gqubule this afternoon. Thank you so much, Mr. Gqubule, for your time, and good afternoon to you. The media briefing, amongst others, Gqubule and Tula Sinqesi, of course, just briefing the country at the back of those engagements with the NEC. Let's start, I suppose, with what Gqubule had to say with energy capacity in the country. Were you at all convinced that we have it all under control in the country in terms of energy preservation, energy capacity in the country, looking at the different stages as well of load shedding?
Okay, I wasn't really convinced. It didn't inspire confidence. But let's just make one thing clear. The improvement in the EF, the energy availability factor, has got nothing to do with improved plant performance. So if you look at the analysis from the 3rd of April, the week starting the 3rd of April, to this week that just ended, starting the 3rd of July, the 3rd of July, is that what we see is that there's been a 6.94 percentage point increase in the energy availability factor. That is entirely due to a similar decrease in maintenance that has happened over the same period. So the improvement there's been no improvement in plant performance. It oscillates between about 15,000 and 16,000 megawatts at all times. So it's about between 31 and 33% planned outages. So I think he was implying that there's been improvements in plant performance, which is not true, and it's entirely due to an instruction given by the board that he must cut down on maintenance. At the beginning of May, June, July, maintenance is going to start again in August. But what the minister did say, which is true, is that maintenance went down from about 15 percentage points to about 5%. And in the last month, they've picked up a little bit on maintenance here.
Yeah. But
over the period...
Yes, Duma, continue your thought.
No, I'm just saying that, so there's two things that have caused lighter load shedding. Number one is the collapse in maintenance. Number two is it's a warm day in Johannesburg today, and we've had a warm winter, and the demand is not as high as we thought it would be. The forecast was 34,000. We've been 31,000 this last week. So we've got 3,000 extra megawatts due to the drop in maintenance, and 3,000 extra megawatts than we had thought due to the warmer winter. Yeah.
He also mentioned quite a bleak future that South Africa might have if we don't address these two things. He said one being the transmission side, but also energy resources in the country, alluding to obviously the gas supply from Mozambique, amongst others, but saying that we might have quite a negative future in the country if we don't address those two issues.
Yes, there was a big report in the Mail and Guardian yesterday about we need to invest 200 billion rands in the grid. Now, the government, the Treasury support that they gave to Eskom was inadequate. They had a 254 billion rands reduction in the debt of Eskom from 423 billion rands. So I've been arguing for a long time that this is inadequate because only 168 billion is addressing the actual balance sheet problem. The rest is addressing a symptom of the problem, which is the interest payments. So I believe that for Eskom, we need to separate Eskom 1 and Eskom 2. So Eskom 1 must be for the legacy assets and the transmission lines. So what they must do is that they must eliminate the entire Eskom debt of 423 billion rands as the government to create the financial runway for Eskom to be able to make these investments in the grid and new capacity. So what he said quite clearly is that Eskom's balance sheet can't handle this 200 billion rands that they need to spend. So since load shedding causes the cost of load shedding since has been more than 2 trillion rands. I can't remember the number. I did it recently, since 2018. So the cost of fixing Eskom is far less than the cost of this disaster. So the government mustn't try to find shortcuts, as they did in 1998 and 2007, of saying, no, the private sector is going to solve this grid problem. The government must pay for the grid problem. They have to, so what I'm trying to say is that they must create the runway for Eskom to invest in the power stations, because we've seen the disaster of lack of investment. And then they must also provide permanent budget allocations to Eskom. So I would say it must be used to, Eskom 2 must be for new capacity, and we must also subsidize the price of electricity, because we have this cost of energy crisis where the prices have increased by 800% since 2007, and these electricity bills are unaffordable for most South Africans, including middle-class South Africans. So we also have to expand the allocation for free basic energy as well.
Yeah. Just lastly on, the energy front, before I move on to what Thulas Nxesi had to say, he also made mention, Kgosientsho Ramokgopa, that there needs to be plans for the future of, or rather for energy sovereignty in the country. What could possibly that plan look like?
I didn't understand what he was saying. I didn't follow that part of the discussion.
I think he was also referring at the
sovereignty means that we must finance our own transition. We must not rely on the independent power producers when the dividends will go outside the country. That is my definition of energy sovereignty. The government must pay for the expansion of new capacity instead of relying on these IPPs, many of them which are not South Africans, and the money will go out of the country.
You're definitely spot on there, because this was just after he had alluded to some of the gas supply that South Africa receives from Mozambique, Duma. I want to touch on what Thulas Nxesi had to say, speaking quite extensively on the Employment Equity Act, but also giving that historical background as to why, as the ANC, they not only find this Employment Equity Act important, but why the president had signed through its amendment. But Thulas Nxesi going to great extents as well, saying solidarity and DA seem to be quite a hindrance, a big critic in terms of laying, complaints regarding, why they think both the EEA and affirmative action would not work. The big question is, why are there delays in, employment equity in South Africa?
Okay, so let me just say the context of this is that since 1994, the ANC has failed dismally to transform this economy in terms of ownership. According to my calculation, at the end of December 2020, black ownership on the stock exchange was 1.7%. And nobody can dispute that. That is the failure of the government to transform this economy. Now, the government made fatal policy mistakes in the design of this BEE policy, where they allowed sectors to set their own targets. So it was a way for them to circumvent the rules, especially in the mining sector and in the finance sector, where the big banks and the mines bullied the government into accepting certain compromises that have resulted in the end of this transformation project. Now, in terms of employment equity, we're going down that route again. The new law is just allowing them to set sector targets the same way that they have sector BEE charters. Now, the sector BEE charters never worked, and I argued against them at the time, that we need one set of rules. And I argue as well with my friend, the head of the Commission for Employment Equity, Tabia Kabinde, that we have to move beyond sector targets. We must have one quota for the whole economy and not give companies the way to circumvent the rules. I believe the time has come for quotas. It happened in Norway. It was highly successful for women, where they set a 40% target in 2003, I think, and in Norway, they achieved the target in about 3 or 4 years. Basically, Tumelo, what we're dealing with in the private sector is not a skills problem. We are dealing with racism by companies that do not want to transform. Let me just give you one shocking statistic I had to check quickly, is that from 2009 to 2022, according to the Commission for Employment Equity, African representation in top management has gone up from 12.5% to 12.3% to 13.5%. That is shocking. over such a long period. There's been no transformation in terms of, so we're dealing with racism by these companies, which are just refusing point blank to transform.
We'll leave it there. Economist and independent researcher Duma, thank you so much for speaking to me at the back of the ANC NEC briefing.